Under Milk Wood by Dylan Thomas.
To begin at the beginning. It is spring, moonless night in the small town. Starless and Bible black, the cobble streets silent, and the hunched quarters and rabbit's wood limping invisible down to the slow black, crow black fishing boat bobbing sea.
The houses are blind as moles, though moles see fine tonight in the snouting velvet dingles. Blind as Captain Cat there in the muffled middle, by the fountain and the town clock. The shops in mourning, the community hall in widow's weeds. And all the people of the lulled and dumbfound town are sleeping now. Hush, the babies are sleeping. The farmers, the fishers, the tradesmen and pensioners, cobbler, schoolteacher, postman and publican, the undertaker and the fancy woman, drunkard, dressmaker, preacher, policeman, the webfoot perlemoon divers and the tidy wives. Young girls lie bedded soft or glide in their dreams, with rings and trousseau, bridesmaided by glowworms down the aisles of the organ-playing wood. The boys are dreaming wicked, or of the bucking ranches of the night and the jolly Rogered sea.
You can hear the dew falling.
You can hear the dew falling, and the hushed town breathing. Only your eyes are unclosed to see the black and folded town fast and slow asleep. And you alone can hear the invisible starfall, the darkest before dawn, minutely dew-grey stir of the black dab-filled sea, where the Arethusa, the curlew and the skylark, Zanzibar, Rhiannon, the rover, the cormorant, and the star of Wales tilt and ride. Listen.
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 It is night, moving in the streets. The processional, salt-slow, musical wind in Church Street and Perlemoon Row. It is the grass growing on Lockhoff Hill. Dewfall, starfall. The sleep of birds in Melcote Wood. Listen. It is tonight in Seahorse Street, trotting silent with seaweed on its hooves along the grey gravel, past curtained fernpot, text and trinket, harmonium, holy dresser, watercolours done by hand, china dog and rosy tin tea caddy. It is night nedding among the snuggeries of babies. Look, it is night, dumbly, royally winding through the pinotage grapevines, going through the graveyard of Bethesda with winds gloved and folded and dew-doffed, tumbling by the sailors' arms.
Time passes. Listen. Time passes. Come closer now.
Come closer now.
In the slow, deep, salt and silent, black-bandaged night, only you can see in the blinded bedrooms, the bras and petticoats over the chairs, the jugs and basins, the glasses of teeth, thou shalt not on the wall, and the yellowing dicky-bird watching pictures of the dead. Only you can hear and see, behind the eyes of the sleepers, the movements and countries and mazes and colours and dismays and rainbows and tunes and wishes and flight and fall and despairs and the big seas of their dreams. From where you are, you can hear their dreams.
Captain Cat, the retired blind sea captain, asleep in his bunk in the sea-shelled, ship-in-bottled, ship-shape, best cabin of Schooner House, dreams of...
Never such seas as any that swamped the decks of his SS Kedwilly, bellying over the bedcoals and jellyfish slippering, sucking him salt deep into the Davy dark, where the fish come biting out from behind the wet green wallpaper of the undersea and nibble him down to his wishbone, and the long dead nuzzle up to him.
Remember me, Captain?
You're dancing Williams.
I lost my step in Nantucket.
Do you see me, Captain? I'm the white bone talking. I'm Tom Fred the donkey man. We shared the same girl once. Her name was Miss Probert.
Rosie Probert, 33 Duck Row. Come on up, boys. I'm dead.
Hold me, Captain. I'm Jonah Jarvis. Come to a bed end. Very enjoyable.
Man, this color joy here always.
Kaliteron, dama auntie het ons mee dat pa aan de arme look.
Aye, Curly.
Tell my missus. No, I never.
I never done what she said. I never.
Yes, but I did.
Is it above?
Is there rum and baboot?
Bosoms and robins.
Concertinas.
Ebenezer's bell.
Is there fighting and onions?
And mossies and daisies.
Dit is in a jam jar.
Buttermilk and whippets.
Rockabye, baby.
Washing on the line.
And old girls in the snug, eh?
How's the tennis in St. James's?
Who milks the cows in Noordhoek?
When she smells, is there dimples?
What's the smell of parsley?
Oh, my dead dears. From where you are, you can hear in Peddler Row in the spring, moonless night, Miss Price, dressmaker and sweet shopkeeper, dream of
Her lover, tall as the town clock tower, Samson syruped, gold-maned, whacking thighed, and piping hot. Thunderbolt based and barnacle-breasted, flailing up the cockles with his eyes like blow lamps, and scooping low over her lonely, loving, hot water-bottled body.
Fanny Price.
Oh, Mr. Mock Edwards.
I'm a draper mad with love. I love you more than all the flannelettes and calico, candlewick and dimity, crash and merino, tusser, cretin and crippen, muslin, poplin, ticking and twill in the whole cloth hall of the world. I've come to take you away to my emporium on the hill, where the change hums on the wires. Throw away your little bed socks and your Karua wool knitted jacket. I will warm the sheets like an electric toaster. I will lie by your side like the Sunday roast.
I will knit you a wallet of forget-me-not blue for the money to be comfy. I will warm your heart by the fire so that you can slip it in under your vest when the shop is closed.
Fanny, Fanny, before the mice gnaw at your bottom drawer, will you say,
Yes, Mook! Yes, Mook! Yes! Yes! Yes!
And all the bells of the till of the town shall ring for our wedding.
Come now, drift up the dark. Come up the drifting sea-dark street now. In the dark night, seesawing like the sea, to the Bible-black, airless attic of a Jack Black the cobbler's shop, where, alone and savagely, Jack Black sleeps in a nightshirt tied to his ankles with elastic and dreams of
Chasing the naughty couples down the grass-green, gooseberry double bed of the wood, flogging the toss-pots in the spit and sawdust, driving out the bare, bold girls from the sixpenny hops of his nightmares.
Ah, footsack! Footsack!
Heavens, the death. The undertaker laughs high and aloud in his sleep and curls up his toes as he sees. Upon waking 50 years ago, snow lay deep on the grass fields behind the sleeping house, and he runs out into the field where his mother is making moss bolikis in the snow, and steals a fistful of snowflakes and sultanas, and climbs back to bed to eat them cold and sweet under the warm white clothes, while his mother dances in the snow kitchen crying out for her lost sultanas.
And in the little pink-eyed cottage next to the undertaker's lie alone the 17 snoring gentle stone of Mr. Waldo, rabbit catcher, barber, herbalist, a cat doctor, a quack, his fat pink hands palms up over the edge of the patchwork kilt, his black boots neat and tidy in the washing basin, his bowler on a nail above the bed, a milk stout and a slice of cold malva pudding under the pillow, and dripping in the dark, he dreams of
Waldo! Waldo! What will the neighbors say? What will the neighbors?
Ooh, poor Mrs. Waldo.
What she puts up with?
Never should have married.
If she didn't have to.
Same as her mother.
There's a husband for you.
Bad as his father.
And you know where he ended up?
Up in the asylum.
Crying for his mom.
Every Sunday.
You know he hasn't got a leg.
And carrying on.
With that Mrs. B.T. Morris.
Up in the quarry.
And seen her baby too.
Oh, it's got his nose.
Oh, it makes my heart bleed, you know.
Oh, what do you do for a drink?
Hey, he sold the panola.
And a sewing machine.
Falling in the gutter.
Talking to the lamppost.
Using language.
Singing in the W.
Oh, poor Mrs. Waldo.
Oh, Waldo! Waldo!
Hush, love. Hush. I'm widower Waldo now.
Waldo! Waldo!
Yes, Mummy?
Oh, what will the neighbors say? What will the neighbors say?
Black as a chimney.
Ringing doorbells.
Breaking windows.
Making mud pies.
Stealing sultanas.
Chalking words.
Saw him in the bushes.
Bunking school.
Send him to bed without any supper.
Give him cenopods and lock him in the dark.
Off to the reformatory.
Off to the reformatory. Learning with a slipper on his BTM.
Waldo! Waldo! What you doing with our Matty?
Will you take this woman, Matty Richards?
Dulcie Prothero.
Effie Tron.
Letty de Gompot.
Mrs. Flusher.
Lotwin Bower.
To be your awful wedded wife?
No. No. No.
Now, in her iceberg white, holily laundered polyester nightgown, under virtuous polar sheets in her spruced and scoured, dust-defying bedroom in Trigg and Trim Bayview, a house for paying guests at the top of the town, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, widow twice of Mr. Ogmore, linoleum, retired, and Mr. Pritchard, failed bookmaker, who, maddened by besoming, swabbing and scrubbing, the voice of the vacuum cleaner and the fume of polish, ironically swallowed disinfectant, fidgets in her rinsed sleep, wakes in a dream, and nudges in the ribs, dead Mr. Ogmore, dead Mr. Pritchard, ghostily on either side.
Mr. Ogmore, Mr. Pritchard, it is time to inhale your balsam.
Oh, Mrs. Ogmore.
Mrs. Pritchard.
Soon it will be time to get up. Tell me your tasks. In order.
I must put my pajamas in the drawer marked pajamas.
I must take my cold bath, which is good for me.
I must wear my flannel band to ward off sciatica.
I must dress behind the curtain and put on my apron.
I must blow my nose.
In the garden, if you please.
In a piece of tissue paper, which afterwards I burn.
I must take my salts, which is good for me.
I must boil the drinking water because of germs.
I must make my herb tea, which is free from tannin.
And have a charcoal biscuit, which is good for me.
I may smoke one pipe of asthma mixture.
In the woodshed, if you please.
And dust the parlour and spray the canary.
I must put on rubber gloves and search the Vorshi for fleas.
I must dust the blinds and then I must raise them.
And before you let the sun in, mind it wipes its shoes.
At the sea end of town, Mr. and Mrs. Floyd, the Perlemoon divers, are sleeping as quiet as death, side by wrinkled side, toothless, salt and brown, like two old kippers in a box. And high above, in Salt Lake Farm, Mr. Utah Watkins counts all night the wife-faced sheep as they leap the fences on the hill, smiling and knitting and bleating, just like Mrs. Utah Watkins.
34, 35, 36, 48, 89.
Need one, sleep one, need two together. Pause the slip stitch over. Ball.
Cherry Owen next door lifts a tankard to his lips, but nothing flows out of it. He shakes the tankard. It turns into a fish. He drinks the fish.
PC Attila Reese lumps out of bed, dead to the dark, and still foghorning, and drags out his helmet from under the bed, but deep in the backyard lock-up of his sleep, a mean voice murmurs.
You'll be sorry for this in the morning.
And he heave-hoes back to bed. His helmet swashes in the dark.
Willy-nilly, postman, asleep up street, walks 21 kilometers to deliver the post, as he does every day of the night, and rat-a-tats hard and sharp on Mrs. Willy-nilly.
Don't spank me, please, teacher.
Whimpers his wife at his side, but every night of her married life she has been late for school.
Mrs. Rose Cottage's eldest, May, peels off her pink and white skin in a furnace, in a tower, in a cave, in a waterfall, and in a wood, and waits there, raw as an onion, for Mr. Wright to leap up the burning, tall, hollow splashes of leaves like a brilliantined trout. Call me Dolores, just like they do in the stories.
Allowed until she dies, Bessie Bighead, hired help, born in the workhouse, smelling of the cowshed, snores bass and gruff on a couch of straw in a loft in Salt Lake Farm, and picks a posy of daisies in Sunday Meadow to put on the grave of Gobber Owen, who kissed her once by the pigsty when she wasn't looking, and never kissed her again, although she was looking all the time.
And the inspectors of cruelty fly down into Mrs. Butcher Bainen's stream to persecute Mr. Bainen for selling owl meat, dog's eyes, man chop. Mr. Bainen, in Butcher's bloodied apron, spring heels down Church Street, a finger, not quite his own, in his mouth. Straight-faced in his cunning sleep, he pulls the legs of his dreams and, hunting on pigback, shoots down the wild giblets.
And in Church Street, which you alone can see, it is so dark under the chapel in the skies, the Reverend Eli Jenkins, poet, preacher, turns in his deep towards dawn sleep and dreams of...
Aye, Stedfords.
He intricately rhymes to the music of Ramkiki and Gora all night long in his Sangoma speedy nightgown in a beer tent black with baruti.
Mr. Pugh, schoolmaster, fathoms asleep, pretends to be sleeping, spies Foxy round the droop of his nightcap, and whistles up.
Murder.
Marianne Sailors dreams of the Garden of Eden. She comes in her smock frock and clogs, away from the cool, scrubbed, cobbled kitchen, with the Sunday school pictures on the whitewashed wall, and the farmer's almanac hung above the settee, and the sides of bacon on the ceiling hooks, and goes down the cockle-shelled paths of that apple pie kitchen garden, ducking under the gypsy's clothes pegs, catching her apron on the blackcurrant bushes, past bean rows and onion bed and tomatoes ripening on the wall, towards the old man playing the harmonica in the orchard, and sits down on the grass at his side and shells the green peas that grow up through the lap of her frock that brushes the dew.
Time passes. Listen.
Time passes.
An owl flies home past Bethesda to a chapel in an oak, and the dawn inches up. The principality of the sky lightens now over our green hill, into spring morning, larked and crowed and belling.
Stand on this hill. This is Lock of Hill, old as the hills, high, cool and green. And from this small circle of stones, made not by strandloopers, but by Mrs. Bainen's Billy, you can see all the town below you sleeping in the first of the dawn. You can hear the lovesick wood pigeons mooning in bed. A dog barks in his sleep, farm years away. The town ripples like a lake in the waking haze.
Less than 500 souls inhabit the 3 quaint streets, and a few narrow bylanes and scattered farmsteads that constitute the small, decaying watering place which may, indeed, be called a backwater of life, without disrespect to its natives who possess, to this day, a salty individuality of their own. The main street, Church Street, consists for the most part of humble single-storied houses, many of which attempt to achieve some measure of cheerfulness by bringing themselves out in crude colours and by the liberal use of whitewash, though there are remaining a few 19th century houses of more pretension, if on the whole in a sad state of disrepair. Though there is little to attract the hill climber, the health seeker, the sportsman, or the weekending motorist, the contemplative may, if sufficiently attracted to spare it some leisurely hours, find in its gravelled streets and its little fishing harbour, in its several curious customs, and in the conversation with its local characters, some of that picturesque sense of the past so frequently lacking in towns and villages which have kept more abreast of the times. The one place of worship, with its neglected graveyard, is of no architectural interest.
Who pulls the town hall bellward but blind Captain Cat? One by one the sleepers are wrung out of sleep this one morning, as every morning, and soon you shall see the chimney slow up flying snow as Captain Cat, in sailor's cap and sea boots, announces today with his loud "Get out of bed" bell.
Now, woken at last by the out-of-bed, sleepy head, Polly put the kettle on town hall bell, Lily Smalls, Mrs. Bainan's treasure, comes downstairs from a dream of royalty, who at night, all night long, went larking with her, full of sauce, in the Melcote Wood dark, and then puts the kettle on the Primus ring in Mrs. Bainan's kitchen, and looks at herself in Mr. Bainan's shaving glass over the sink, and sees...
Ooh, there's a face. Where'd you get that hair from? Got it from an old tomcat. Give it back then, love. Ooh, there's a Pim. Where'd you get that nose from, Lily? Got it from my father, silly. You've got it on upside down. Ooh, there's a conch. Look at your complexion. Oh, no, you look. Needs a bit of makeup. It needs a veil. Ooh, there's glamour. Where'd you get that smile, Lil? Never you, my girl. Nobody loves you. That's what you think. Well, who is it loves you? I shan't tell. Oh, come on, Lily. Cross your heart then. I cross my heart.
And very softly, her lips almost touching her reflection, she breathes the name and clouds the shaving glass.
Lily!
Yes, ma?
Where's my tea, girl?
What do you think, in the cat box? Coming up, ma?
Mr. Pugh in the schoolhouse opposite takes up the morning tea to Mrs. Pugh and whispers on the stairs.
Here's your arsenic, dear, and your weed killer biscuit. I've throttled your parakeet. I've spat in the vases. I've put cheese in the mouse holes. Here's your nice tea, dear.
Too much sugar.
You haven't tasted it yet, dear.
Too much milk, then. Give me my glasses. No, not my reading glasses. I want to look out. I want to see.
And PC artilleries. Ox-broad, bush-booted, stomping out of handcuff house in a heavy beef red huff, black-browed under his damp helmet.
Organ Morgan at his bedroom window, playing chords on the sill to the morning fishwife gulls, who, heckling over Seahorse Street, observe...
Me, dye bread, Hurrying to the bakery, pushing in my shirt tails, buttoning my button, ping goes a button. Why can't they sew them? No time for breakfast, nothing for breakfast. There's wives for you.
Me, Mrs. Diebread 1, Captain Shawled and no old Corset. Nice to be comfy, nice to be nice. Clogging on the cobbles to stir up a neighbour. Oh, Mrs. Sarah, can you spare a loaf, love? Diebread forgot the bread.
Me, Mrs. Diebread 2. Gypsied to kill in a silky scarlet petticoat above my knees. Dirty, pretty knees. See my body through my petticoat, brown as a berry. High-heel shoes with one heel missing. Tortoiseshell comb in my bright, black, slinky hair. Nothing else at all on but a dab of scent. Lolling gaudy at the doorway. Tell your fortune in the tea leaves. Scowling at the sunshine. Lighting up my pipe. Me, Miss Price, pretty in my print housecoat, deft at the clothesline, nutty as a kiwit, then pit-pat back to my egg in its cozy, my crisp toast fingers, my homemade plum and butter pat.
Me, no good boyer, up to no good, in the wash house.
Me, Polly Garter, under the washing line, giving the breast in the garden to my bonny new baby. Nothing grows in our garden, only washing and babies. And where's their fathers live, my love? Over the hills and far away. You're looking up at me now. I know what you're thinking, you poor little milky creature. You're thinking you're no better than you should be, Polly, and that's good enough for me. Oh, isn't life a terrible thing? Thank God.
Now frying pan spit, kettles and cats purr in the kitchen. The town smells of seaweed and breakfast all the way down from Bayview, where Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, in smock and turban, baked besom to engage the dust, picks at her starchless bread and sips lemon-rind tea.
To Bottom Cottage, where Mr. Waldo, in bowler and bib, gobbles his bubble and squeak and kippers, and swigs from the sauce bottle.
Mary Ann Sailors praises the Lord who made porridge.
Mr. Pugh remembers ground glass as he juggles his omelette.
Mrs. Pugh nags the salt cellar.
Mr. and Mrs. Cherry Owen, in their Seahorse Street room that is bedroom, parlour, kitchen and scullery, sit down to last night's supper of onions boiled in their overcoats and broth of spuds and bacon rind and bones.
See that smudge on the wall by the picture of Auntie Blossom? That's where you threw the gravy? You only missed me by an inch.
I always miss Auntie Blossom too.
Remember last night? In your reels, my boy, as drunk as a deacon, with a big wet bucket and a fish frill full of stout. And you looked at me and you said, God has come home, you said. And then over the bucket you went, sprawling and bawling, and the floor was all flagons and eels.
Was I wounded?
And then you took off your trousers and you said, does anybody want to fight? Oh, you old buffoon.
Oh, give us a kiss.
And then you sang Aberystwyth, tenor and bass.
I always sing Aberystwyth.
And then you did a little dance on the table.
I did?
Drop dead.
And then what did I do?
And then you sang Aberystwyth all over again. And then I got you into bed, and you breathed all night like a brewery.
From Bain and Butcher's in Church Street, the smell of fried liver sidles out with onions on its breath. And listen, in the dark breakfast room behind the shop, Mr. and Mrs. Bainan, waited upon by their treasure, enjoy, between bites, their every morning hullabaloo. And Mrs. Bainan slips the gristly bits under the tasselled tablecloth to her fat cat.
She likes the liver, Ben.
She ought to do, Bess. It are her brothers.
Oh, do you hear that, Lily?
Yes, ma'am.
We're eating pusscat.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you cat butcher.
It was doctored, ma'am.
Oh, what's that got to do with it?
Yesterday, we had mole.
Oh, Lily!
Monday, otter. Tuesday, Dusty.
Hey, go on, May. He's the biggest liar in town.
Don't you dare say that about the old boss.
Everybody knows it, May.
Mr. Boehner never tells a lie. Do you, Ben?
Oh, no, yes. And now I are going after the corgis with my little cleaver.
Up the street, in the Sailor's Arms, Sinbad Sailors, grandson of Mary Ann Sailors, draws a pint in the sunlit bar. The ship's clock in the bar says 11:30. 11:30 is opening time. The hands of the clock have stayed still at 11:30 for 50 years. It is always opening time in the Sailor's Arms.
Here's to me, Sinbad.
No good boyo goes out in the dinghy Zanzibar, ships the oars, drifts slowly in the dab-filled bay, and lying on his back in the unbaled water among the crab's legs and tangled lines, looks up at the spring sky. I don't know who's up there, and I don't care.
He turns his head and looks up at Loco Phil and sees, among green leather trees, the white houses of the strewn-away farms, where farm boys whistle, dogs shout, cows low, but all too far away for him, or you, to hear. And in the town the shops squeak open. Mr. Edwards, in butterfly collar and straw hat, at the doorway of Manchester House, measures, with his eye, the dawdlers by, for flannel shirts and shrouds and flowery blouses, and bellows to himself, in the darkness behind his eye,
I love Miss Price.
And, sitting at the open window of Schooner House, blind Captain Cat hears all the morning of the town.
That's willy-nilly, knocking at Bayview. Rat-a-tat, very soft. The knocker's got a kid glove on. Who sent a letter to Mrs. Ogmore Pritchett? Careful now. She swabs the front glassy. Every step's like a bar of soap. Mind your size 12s. That old Bessie would beeswax the lawn to make the birds slip.
Morning, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard.
Good morning, postman.
Here's a letter for you with stamped and addressed envelope enclosed all the way from Ladybrand. A gentleman wants to study birds, and can he have accommodation for 2 weeks and a bath? Vegetarian?
9.
You wouldn't know he was in the house, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard. He'd be out in the mornings at bang of dawn with his bag of breadcrumbs and his little telescope.
And come home at all hours covered with feathers. I don't want persons in my nice clean rooms breathing all over the chairs.
Cross me heart, he won't breathe.
And putting their feet on my carpets and sneezing on my china and sleeping in my sheets.
He only wants a single bed, Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard.
And back she goes to the kitchen to polish the potatoes.
Captain Cat hears willy-nilly's feet, heavy on the distant pavement.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He stopped at schoolhouse.
Morning, Mrs. Pugh. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard won't have a gentleman in from Ladybrand because he'll sleep in her sheets.
Give me the parcel.
It's for Mr. Pugh, Mrs. Pugh.
Never you mind. What's inside it?
A book called Lives of the Great Poisoners.
That's Manchester House.
Morning, Mr. Edwards. Very small news. Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard won't have birds in the house, and Mr. Pugh's bought a book now on how to do in Mrs. Pugh.
Have you got a letter from her?
Miss Price loves you with all her heart. Smelling of lavender today. She's down to the last of the elderflower wine, but the quince jam's bearing up, and she's knitting roses on the doilies. Last week, she sold 3 jars of boiled sweets, pound of humbugs, half a box of jelly babies, and 6 coloured photos of Larachob, yours forever. Then 21 X's.
Oh, willy-nilly, she's a ruby. Here's my letter. Put it into her hands now.
Oh, Mr. Waldo hurrying to the Sailor's Arms. Pint of stout with an egg in it. There's a letter for him.
It's another fraternity summons, Mr. Waldo.
Oh, God, not another one.
All the women are out this morning, in the sun. You can tell it's spring. That's Mrs. Diebread one, waltzing up the street like a jelly. Every time she shakes it, slap, slap, slap. Who's that? Mrs. Butcher baying with her pet black cat. It follows her everywhere. Meow and all. High heels now in the morning too. Mrs. Rose Cottage, eldest May, 17 and never been kissed. Huh. Yeah, right. Going on young and mocking under my window to the field with the nanny goats. She reminds me all the way. Can't hear what the women are gabbing round the fountain. Same as ever. Who's having a baby? Who blacked whose eye? Seen Polly Garter giving a belly an airing. There should be a law. Seen Mrs. Bain's new mauve jumper? It's an old grey jumper, just died. Who's dead? Who's dying? There's a lovely day. Oh, the cost of soap flakes.
Somebody's coming. Now the voices round the fountain can see. Somebody's coming. Hush. There's a hush. You can tell by the noise of the hush. It's Polly Garter.
Hello? Polly? Who's there?
Me, love.
That's Polly Garter. Hello, Polly, my love.
Can you hear the dumb goose hiss of the wives as they huddle and peck or flounce at a waddle away? Oh, who cuddled you when? Which of their gandering hubbies moaned in Moorcout Wood for your naughty mothering arms and body like a wardrobe, love? Scrub the floors of the community hall for the Mothers' Union social dance. You're one mother who won't wriggle her roly-poly bum or pat her fat little buttery foot in that wedding-ringed holy tonight. Though the waltzing breadwinners snatched from the cosy smoke of the sailor's arms will grizzle and mope.
Too late, cock. Too late.
For the town's half over with this morning, the morning's busy as bees.
There's a clip-clop of horses on the sun-honeyed cobbles of the humming street. Hammering of horseshoes, gobble, quackle, cackle. Tom-tit-twitter of the bird-hound's boars. Brying on Dusty Down. Bread is baking, pigs are grunting, chop goes the butcher. Milk churns bell, tills ring, sheep cough, dogs shout, and saws sing.
Oh, the spring, whinny and morning move from the clog-dancing farms. The gulls gab and rabble on the boat-bobbing river and sea. And the cockles, bubbling in the sand, the scamper of sanderlings, curlew cry, crow-caw, pigeon coo, clock strike, bull bellow. And the ragged gabble of the slovenly bear garden school. As the women scratch and babble in Mrs. Organ Morgan's general shop, where everything is sold. Custard, buckets, henna, rat traps, shrimp nets, sugar, stamps, confetti, paraffin, hatchets, and whistles.
Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard?
La-di-da.
She's got a man in Lady Brand.
And he's got a little telescope to look at birds.
Willy-nilly said.
Remember her first husband? He didn't need a telescope.
Yeah, he looked at them undressing through the keyhole.
And he used to shout, Tellio!
But Mr. Ogmore was a proper gentleman.
Yeah, even though he hanged his collie.
Seen Mrs. Butcher-Bainan?
She says Butcher-Bainan put the dogs in the mince.
Go on, man. He's pulling her leg.
Now don't you dare tell her that. There's a dear.
No, she'll think he's trying to pull it off and eat it.
There's a nasty lot live here when you come to think.
Look at no good boyo now.
Too lazy to wipe his snout.
And going out fishing every day. And all he ever brought back was a Mrs. Samuel.
You know, he's been in the water for more than a week.
And look at Oki Milkman's wife that nobody's ever seen.
He keeps her in the cupboard with all the empties.
And think of Diebrecht with 2 wives.
One for the daytime and one for the night.
Men are brutes on the quiet.
And in willy-nilly, the postman's dark and sizzling damp, tea-coated, misty pygmy kitchen, where the spitting cat kettles throb and hop on the range, Mrs. Willy-nilly steams open Mr. Mogg Edwards' letter to Miss Fanny Price and reads it aloud to Willy-nilly by the squint of the spring sun through the one sealed window running with tears, while the bedraggled hens at the back door whimper and snivel for the liquorish bock-black tea.
Beloved Fanny Price, my bride in heaven, I love you until death do us part, and then we shall be together forever and ever. A new parcel of ribbons has come to Llandudno today, all the colours in the rainbow. Oh, I wish I could tie a ribbon in your hair, a white one. But it cannot be. I dreamed last night you were all dripping wet as you sat on my lap, and the Reverend Eli Jenkins went down the street. "I see you've got a mermaid on your lap," he said, and he lifted his hat. He's a proper Christian. Not like Jerry Owen, who said, "You should throw her back," he said. Business is very poorly. Polly Garter bought 2 garters with roses, but she never got stockings. So what's the use, I say? Mr. Wallow tried to sell me a woman's nightie outside, and he said he found it. Fortunately, we know where. I sold a packet of pins to Sinbad sailors to pick his teeth. If this goes on, I shall be in the poorhouse. Oh, my heart is in your bosom and yours in mine. God be with you always, Fanny Price. And may God keep you lovely for me in his heavenly mansion. I must stop now and remain. Yours eternal, Mog Edwards.
And then a little message with a rubber stamp. Shop at Mog's.
The tour out for fishing today. And the fishermen thank God and gob at the gal for luck. And Muslow and Silent make their way uphill from the still sea towards the sailors' arms as...
The children spank and scamper rough and singing out of school into the Draggletail yard. And Captain Cat at his window says soft to himself the words of their song.
Simbamba, Mama Sakenti, Draai sy nek om, gooi hom in die sloot, trap op sy kop, dan is dood.
Mrs. Stybread 1 and Mrs. Stybread 2 are sitting outside their house in Seahorse Street, one darkly, one plumply blooming in the quick, dewy sun. Mrs. Stybread 2 is looking into a crystal ball, which she holds in the lap of her dirty scarlet petticoat, hard against her hard, dark thighs.
Cross my palm with silver, out of our housekeeping money. Ah.
What do you see, lovey?
I see a feather bed with 3 pillows on it, and a text above the bed. I can't read what it says. There's great clouds blowing. Now they've blown away. God is love, the text says.
That's our bed!
And now it's vanished. The sun's spinning like a top. Who's this coming out of the sun? It's a hairy little man with big pink lips. He got a wall eye.
It's Di! It's Stybread!
Shh! The feather bed's floating back. The little man's taking his boots off. He's pulling his shirt over his head. He's beating his chests with his fists. He's climbing into bed.
Go on. Go on.
There's 2 women in bed. He looks at them both with his head cocked on one side. He's whistling through his teeth. Now he grips his little arms around one of the women.
Which one? Which one?
I can't see anymore. There's great clouds blowing again.
Oh, the mean old clouds.
The morning is all singing. The Reverend Eli Jenkins, busy on his morning calls, stops outside the community hall to hear Polly Garter as she scrubs the floors for the Mothers' Union dance, which is tonight.
He was strong as a bear and 2 yards long. I loved a man whose name was Dick. He was big as a barrel and 3 feet thick. And I loved a man whose name was Harry, 6 feet tall and sweet as a cherry. But the one I loved the best, awake or asleep, was little Willie Wee, and he's 6 feet deep. Oh, Tom, Dick, and Harry were 3 fine men, and I'll never have such loving again. But little Willie Wee, who took me on his knee, little Willie Weasel is a man for me. Now men from every parish round, yes, they run after me and roll me on the ground. But whenever I love another man back, be it Johnny from the hill or Sailing Jack, I always think, as they do what they please, of Tom, Dick, and Harry, who were tall as trees. And most I think when I'm by their side, of little Willie Wee, who drowned and died. Oh, Tom, Dick, and Harry were 3 fine men, and I'll never have such loving again. But little Willie Wee, who took me on his knee, little Willie Weasel is the man for me.
Praise the Lord, we are a musical nation.
There goes the Reverend,
says Mr. Waldo at the smoked herring-brown window of the unwashed Sailor's Arms.
Oh, Mr. Waldo,
sighs Sinbad Sailors.
I dote on that gossamer bane.
Love, sings the spring. The bed-spring grass bounces under birds' bums and lambs, and Gossamer Bainen, school-teacher, spoon-stirred and quivering, teaches her Slubberdegullion class.
It was the lover and his lass, with a head and a hoe and a hey, nonny-no, and a hey.
No. Oh, your accents, children. It was a lover and his lass, and with a hey and a ho and a hey nonny no.
Oh, Mr. Waldo,
says Sinbad Sailors.
She's a lady all over.
And Mr. Waldo, who is thinking of a woman soft as Eve and sharp as sciatica, to share his bread-pudding bed, answers,
Oh, no lady that I know is.
And if only Grandma died, cross me heart and I'd go down on my knees. Mr. Waldo, I'd say. Miss Gossamer, I'd say.
Birds to sing, a ting-a-ting-a-ting, sweet lovers love the spring.
Polly Garter sings, still on her knees.
Tom, Dick, and Harry were 3 fine men, and I'll never have such ding-a-ding again.
And the morning school is over, and Captain Cat at his curtained schooner's portal, open to the spring sun tides, hears the naughty four-footing children tumble and rhyme on the gravel.
In the blind-drawn dark dining room of Schoolhouse, dusty and echoing as a dining room in a vault, Mr. and Mrs. Pugh are silent over cold grey cottage pie. Mr. Pugh reads, as he forks the shroud meat in, from the lives of the great poisoners. He has bound a plain brown paper cover around the book. Slyly, between slow mouthfuls, he side-spies up at Mrs. Pugh, poisons her with his eyes, then goes on reading. He underlines certain passages and smiles in secret.
Persons with manners do not read at table,
says Mrs. Pugh. She swallows a digestive tablet as big as a horsepill, washing it down with clouded pea soup water.
Some persons were brought up in pigsties.
Pigs don't read at table, dear.
Bitterly she flicks dust from the broken cruet. It settles on the pie in a thin net rain.
Pigs can't read, my dear.
I know one who can.
Alone in the hissing laboratory of his wishes, Mr. Pugh minces among bad vats and Jeroboams, tiptoes through spinneys of murdering herbs, agony dancing in his crucibles, and mixes, especially for Mrs. Pugh, a venomous porridge unknown to toxicologists, which will scald and viper through her until her ears fall off like figs. Her toes grow big and black as balloons, and steam comes screaming out of her navel.
You know best, my dear,
says Mr. Pugh, and quick as a flash, he ducks her in rat soup.
What's that book by your trough, Mr. Pugh?
It's a theological work, my dear. Lives of the great saints.
I saw you talking to a saint this morning, Saint Polly Garter. She was martyred again last night.
But I always think, as we tumble into bed, of little Willie Wee, who is dead. dead, dead.
The sunny, slow, lulling afternoon yawns and moons through the dozy town. The sea lolls, laps and idles in, with fishes sleeping in its lap. The meadows still as Sunday. The shut-eyed tasselled bulls, the goat and daisy dingles, nap happy and lazy. The dumb duck ponds snooze. Clouds sag and pillow on Lockoff Hill.
Persons with manners,
snaps Mrs. Cold Pugh,
do not nod at table.
Mr. Pugh cringes awake. He puts on a soft soaping smile. It is sad and grey under his nicotine egg-yellow weeping walrus Victorian moustache, worn thick and long in memory of Dr. Crippen.
You should wait until you retire to your sty,
says Mrs. Pugh, sweet as a razor. His fawning, measly quarter smile freezes. Sly and silent, he foxes into his chemist's den, and there, in a hiss and Prussic circle of cauldrons and phials brimful with pox and the Black Death, cooks up a fricassee of deadly nightshade, nicotine, hot frog, cyanide and bat spit for his needling stalactite hag and bed nag of a poker-backed nutcracker wife.
I beg your pardon, my dear.
He murmurs with a wheedle.
Captain Cat, at his window thrown wide to the sun, and the clippered seas he sailed long ago when his eyes were blue and bright. Slumbers and voyages, ear-ringed and rolling. I love you, Rosie Probert, tattooed on his belly. He brawls with broken bottles in the fag and babble of the dark, dark bars. Rows with a herd of short and good-time cows in every naughty port, and twines and souses with the drowned and blowsy-breasted dead. He weeps as he sleeps and sails, and the tears run down his grog-blossomed nose. One voice of all he remembers most dearly as his dream buckets down.
Lazy early Rosie, with a flaxen thatch, whom he shared with Tom Fred, the donkeyman, and many another seaman, clearly, and near to him speaks from the bedroom of her dust, in that gulf and haven, fleets by the dozen have anchored for the little heaven of the night. But she speaks to Captain Napping Cat alone, Mrs. Probert.
From Duck Road, Jack, quack twice, and ask for Rosie.
Is the one love of his sea life that was sardined with women.
What seas did you see, Tomcat, in your sailoring days long, long ago? What sea beasts were in the wavery green when you were my master?
I'll tell you the truth. Seas barking like seals, blue seas and green, seas covered with eels and mermen and whales.
What seas did you sail, old whaler Wen, on the blubbery waves between Durban and Wales? You were my bosun.
As true as I'm here, dear, you tomcat's tart. You landlubber, Rosie, you cozy love. My easy as easy, my true sweetheart. Seas green as a bean, seas gliding with swans in the seal-barking moon.
What seas were rocking, my little deckhand? My favourite husband, in your sea boots and hunger, my duck, my whaler, my honey, my daddy, my pretty sugar sailor, with my name on your belly, when you were a boy, long, long ago.
I'll tell you no lies. The only sea I saw was the seesaw sea, with you riding on it. Lie down. Lie easy. Let me shipwreck in your thighs.
Knock twice, Jack, at the door of my grave, and ask for Rosie.
Rosie Probert.
Remember her. She is forgetting. The earth which filled her mouth is vanishing from her. Remember me? I have forgotten you. I am going into the darkness of the darkness forever. I have forgotten that I was ever born.
In the still middle of the blue-bagged bay, no good boyo fishing from the Zanzibar. I want to be good, boyo, but nobody will let me.
The afternoon buzzes like lazy bees round the flowers round May Rose Cottage, nearly asleep in the field of nanny goats who hum and gently butt the sun. She blows love on a puffball.
He loves me. He loves me not. He loves me. He loves me not. He loves me. The dirty old fool.
Lazy she lies alone in clover and sweet grass. 17 and never been sweet in the grass. Ho, ho.
The Reverend Eli Jenkins, inky in his cool front parlour, or poem room, tells only the truth in his life work. The population, main industry, shipping, history, topography, flora and fauna of the town he worships in. The White Book of Ludick. His mother, propped against a pot in a palm, with her wedding ring waist and bust like a black cloth dining table, suffers in her loneliness.
Oh, angels, be careful there with your knives and forks,
he prays. There is no known likeness of his father Esau, who, undog-collared because of his little weakness, was scythed to the bone one harvest by mistake when sleeping with his weakness in the corn. He lost all ambition and died with one leg.
Poor Dad,
grieved the Reverend Eli.
To die of drink and agriculture.
Now the town is dusk. Each gravel, donkey, goose and gooseberry street is a thoroughfare of dusk. And dusk and ceremonial dust, and night's first darkening snow and the sleep of birds, drift under and through the live dusk of this place of love. Ludick is the capital of dusk.
Mrs. Ogmore Pritchard, at the first drop of the dusk shower, seals all her sea view doors, draws the germ-free blinds, sits erect as a dry dream on a high-backed hygienic chair, and wills herself to a cold, quick sleep. At once, at twice, Mr. Ogmore and Mr. Pritchard, who all day long have been gossiping like ghosts in the woodshed, planning the loveless destruction of their glass widow, reluctantly sigh and sidle into her clean house.
You first, Mr. Ogmore.
After you, Mr. Pritchard.
No, Mr. Ogmore, you widowed her first.
And in through the keyhole, with tears where their eyes once were, they ooze and grumble.
Husbands?
She says in her sleep. There is acid love in her voice for one of the two shambling phantoms. Mr. Ogmore hopes that it's not for him. So does Mr. Pritchard.
I love you both.
Oh, Mrs. Ogmore.
Oh, Mrs. Pritchard.
Soon it will be time to go to bed. Tell me your tasks. In order.
We must take our pajamas from the drawer marked
pajamas.
And then you must take them off.
Oh. Down in the dusking town, May Rose Cottage, still lying in clover, listening to the nanny goats chew, draws circles of lipstick round her nipples.
I'm fast. I'm a bad lot. God will strike me dead. I'm 17. I'll go to hell.
She tells the goats.
You just wait. I'll sin till I blow up.
She lies deep, waiting for the worst to happen. The goats champ and sneer.
Unmarried girls, alone in their privately bridal bedrooms, powder and curl for the dance of the world.
Mr. Waldo, in his corner of the Sailor's Arms, sings.
In Cape Town City when I was young, I live by the castle keep. 6 a week was my wages for working for the chimney sweep. 6 cold pennies he gave me, not a farthing more or less, and all the fare I could afford was parsnip gin and watercress.
Everybody.
Sweep, sweep, chimney sweep. I wept through Cape Town City, pouring barefoot in the rain, till a kind young woman took pity. Poor little chimney sweep, she said, black as the ace of spades. Oh, nobody swept my chimney since my husband upped and went his way. Come and sweep my chimney, she sighed to me with a blush. Oh, come and sweep my chimney, bring along your chimney. Cheers!
And at the doorway of Bethesda House, the Reverend Jenkins recited to Lock of Hill his sunset poem.
Every morning when I awake, dear Lord, a little prayer I make. Oh, please to keep thy lovely eye on all poor creatures born to die. And every evening at sundown, I ask a blessing on the town. Whether we last the night or no, I'm sure is always touch and go. We are not wholly bad or good, who live our lives 'neath Melcote Wood. And though I know wilt be the first to see our best side, not our worst, oh, let us see another day. Bless us this holy night, I pray. And to the sun we all will bow and say goodbye. But just for now.
Blind Captain Cat climbs into his bunk. Like a cat he sees in the dark. Through the voyages of his tears he sails to see the dead.
Dancing Williams.
Still dancing, Exe?
Jonah Jarvis.
Still.
Rosie with God. She has forgotten dying.
The dead come out in their Sunday best.
Listen to the night breathing.
Organ Morgan goes to the chapel to play the organ. He plays alone at night to anyone who will listen. Lovers, revelers, the silent dead, tramps or sheep. He sees Bach lying on a tombstone.
Johann Sebastian.
Oh.
Johann Sebastian, mighty Bach. Oh, Bach. Bach.
To hell with you,
says Cherry Owen, who is resting on the tombstone on his way home.
Mr. Mogg Edwards and Miss Fanny Price, happily apart from one another at the top and the sea end of the town, write their every night letters of love and desire. In the warm white book of Lodechob, you will find the little map of the islands of their contentment.
Oh, my Mog, I am yours forever.
And she looks around with pleasure at her own neat, never dull room, which Mr. Mogg Edwards will never enter.
Come to my arms, Fanny.
And he hugs his lovely money to his own heart.
and Mr. Waldo, drunk in Melcote Wood, hugs his lovely Polly Garter under the eyes and rattling tongues of the neighbours and the birds, and he does not care. He smacks his live red lips. But it is not his name that Polly Garter whispers as she lies under the oak and loves him back. 6 feet deep, that name sings in the cold earth.
But I always think, as we tumble into bed, of little Willie Wee, who is dead, dead, dead.
The thin night thickens.
A breeze from the creased water sighs the streets close under Melcote waking wood. The wood, whose every tree foot's cloven in the black glad sight of the hunters of lovers. That is a God-built garden to Mary Ann sailors. Who knows there is a heaven on earth, and that the chosen people of his kind fire in Larachop land? That is the fair day farmhand's wantoning ignorant chapel of brides' beds. And to the Reverend Eli Jenkins, a green-leaved sermon on the innocence of men. The sudden wind-shaken wood springs awake for the second dark time this one spring day.
Oh, let us see another day. Bless us this holy night, I pray, and to the sun we all will bow and say goodbye. But just for